Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. In today's video, I am sharing more gel press tips and techniques and things I'm learning along the way trying them out. In my first video trying the gel press, I used a standard 5x7 rectangle and I just used basic white cardstock and occasionally color cardstock. In today's video, I'm trying out shaped gel presses. I have a square, a triangle, and two different sizes of circles. Plus, I'm going to try out doing some techniques before I add my gel press print. Things like heat embossing and light stamping. So let's just dive right in and have some fun making card backgrounds. I'm going to start by stamping and heat embossing this 6x6 background stamp from Simon Says Stamp that's called Thank You Text. So I'm going to take the foam out of my original size Misti and set it aside. And then I'm going to put a 6x6 piece of white cardstock into my original Misti and put the large stamp on top. I'm going to be using the Stamp Market's Emboss ink, and I'm going to really ink up this entire stamp because it's got lots of tiny little letters. I'm going to use some anti-static powder and my Tonic Studio Sweep to brush that away, and of course my StampersSecret Debbie tool to get nice even pressure across the entire stamp. It's hard to see embossing ink on white cardstock, so it's important to try and get the best impression that you can. I am putting white embossing powder on top, so you can just barely see it here, but once we do our prints on top, you'll be able to see it better. This time I'm going to use the same stamp on white cardstock, but I am using Slate ink from the Stamp Market. I'm going to use my StampersSecret Debbie tool again to get really good impression, but this is a darker gray, so I'm not going to really worry about it being fully stamped in every single little section because I really want this to kind of blend into the background. I'm going to have our print on top. So I'm going to use the larger of the circles that I bought, and I'm going to place it on my glass mat, and I'm using some Distress Oxide ink refills this time, little droplets on top, and then I'm just going back and forth with my brayer, and I'm going to place a piece on top of that and use my larger brayer to really get a good impression. And I love this. I think that's great. So I'm going to roll the excess off on the side because you never know when you can use it. And this time I'm going to try some of the Stamp Market's ink refills, and I'm just going to go back and forth until the entire circle is covered. Place my cardstock down on top and then use my large brayer to press it down. And again, now you can see that white heat embossed text background, and I love that. So this time I am going to go back over that first print that we created and add a little pink to it. You can see I just swiped some from the ink pad right on the top and the bottom and then just pressed it right down on top. I lined it up by holding up the cardstock and just making sure that it was in about the same place. And I did the same thing with the second print, and I'm very happy with these. So that's another way you can use these gel presses to do some stamping or some heat embossing before you even get started making your prints. I liked this first background so much, I'm going to use the same stamp, this time with the Stamp Market's Blush ink, which is a nice light pink. I thought it would look great as a background. And if you don't have refills for the Distress Oxide inks, feel free to use your stamp pads. Just be careful, try not to cross-contaminate the pad itself. I put down lines and then I use my brayer to kind of blend them together. And I accidentally always go over the pink a little bit too much with the orange. So I always end up having to put down a little bit more pink because I love the combination of pink, orange, and yellow. I just think it's such a fun look. I did grab 48 acrylic tubes of paint. I just got this off of Amazon. It wasn't very expensive, so I thought I would try some different color combinations and some different ways to use acrylic paint. And for this technique, I'm going to try to use an embossed piece of cardstock on the gel press to make a print on embossed cardstock. So I am using a small amount of acrylic paint here, and I think that would normally work really well. This paint dries very quickly. So you can see when I first pick up this print, very little paint came off. It all stuck to the gel press. So for this paint, you do need a little bit more than what I was using. The first time I used the gel press, I was using way too much of everything, and so I was getting a lot of blobby backgrounds. This time, I definitely feel like with this particular paint, you need a little bit more. So experiment with what you have. I'm gonna do another embossed background. This is also from Pink and Main, and I am using a Copic marker to draw some marks on my glass mat. That will wipe away with an alcohol pad or some alcohol antibacterial, but that gives me an idea of where the center of this area is, so I know where to put the cardstock. I am going to do the technique that I shared in my last gel press video, and I'll link to that up here, where you can use alcohol inks right on the gel press, and then once they dry, you put a little bit of acrylic paint down and you can lift it up on regular paper. So I'm not using Yupo paper here. I'm not using any type of alcohol ink paper. I am just getting my gel press to where I like it with a really fun pattern of alcohol inks, and then I'm using the blower to really dry it, and then I'm placing down my acrylic paint and brayering it smooth, and then placing that cardstock in the center of those marks that I made and using my brayer on top to really press it down and then pulling it off, and you can see that the alcohol ink actually transfers to the embossed cardstock. So definitely embossing is fun. You just have to find different ways to add mediums to it. I am just going to use some antibacterial gel to clean up both the registration marks that I created and the alcohol ink on the glass mat, and to clean up my brayer. So you can see how nice and clean this gets. This is a tip that I got from Tim Holtz watching his live with the brayers, and it really works. Okay, I am using some Hero Arts dies, and I've die cut the word thanks and happy, and I'm gonna once again use some Distress Oxide ink pads right on the gel press, and I'm actually creating a rainbow of stripes. I'm trying not to go over the colors so that I don't cross-contaminate my pads, and then I'm just using the brayer once to kind of smooth out those stripes. Now I'm gonna press the front of the die cut down into the gel press to color that die cut, and then I'll place some cardstock on top. You can use, how cool is that, the reverse of it within a spot of rainbow there, and I just love the way it colors those die cuts so easily, and it just has a different look than if you were ink blending the die cuts. So this is just fun to play around with. It would be really neat, I think, to do maybe a heart shape or a flower with different colors on the gel press. So just experiment and see what kind of die cuts you like to play with. This was my favorite. Getting, again, another round of color really helped it to stand out. Okay, so this time I'm just using salvaged patina, and I'm going to press it down on the white cardstock. So another comment that I got a lot was that some of the beading on the gel press was just because it hasn't been seasoned. I haven't used them very much. So I was experimenting with placing ink down on the gel press and then just stamping it off on paper several times. And I do think that that helped. So if you are new to gel press as well, just like me, maybe try inking up your entire gel press with some ink and stamping it off just to get it started of getting seasoned a little bit. And then the more you use it, the better it will become. So this time I actually put the thanks down and got that reverse on my print, and then I also got the color on the die cut. Just a 2-for-1 that I really love, and you know how I love using stencils with them. So much fun. This stencil with the circles is from My Favorite Things. I'll link to it down in the YouTube description box below, and I love the kind of wobbly look to those circles as well. Here again, I am putting that die cut down so that I can pick up the reverse on this circle and then also have the color on the die cut. So just lots of different ways to try using die cuts, using embossed pieces. This time I'm going to put the thanks down onto the gel press and then stamp it off on the side because, and I'm going to use my brayer here to make sure I get even pressure since I'm not working in my Misti, and I'm going to peel that back and check that out. Just a really nice background there. And now I'm going to place the paper down on the gel press and see what's left behind. The little tip on this though is, however, it's going to read backwards, but you can't really tell. It's kind of fuzzy anyway, so I really like the look anyway. Again, I'm going to use the stencil. This time you can see how I'm doing it. I'm basically tilting the paper so that I line up the circle that I've already printed with the new circle that I am using with the stencil there. And see, those little dots kind of hide the fact that it's not like a perfect stamp or anything like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. These are more about, you know, getting some techniques in. If you're feeling your creativity kind of a little low, I've definitely been feeling that lately, and this really helps to just play and create a ton of very colorful, really fun backgrounds that you can use for all kinds of different cards, honestly. So here's a fun mix of acrylic inks. I'm going to lay the stencil down on top of that. I'm going to roll off some of that paint, and then I'm going to place an A2 piece of white cardstock down, and I've got now some dots on top of the text and all of that. So this is just, again, you have multiple prints here that you can make because I put the acrylic paint so thick. And then once you take off the stencil, you get another print. Really love these shaped gel presses because I feel like they are very easy to use to create cards because everything's contained within that shape. Now let's turn those backgrounds into cards. The first thing that I did was cut everything down to an A2 size, and then many of them got cut down to 4 by 5 1/4. So here's all my A2s, and you can see I've got a variety of embossed, stamped, heat embossed, just acrylic paint, ink, all the things, then the die cuts as well. So the first card I'm going to take is the embossed panel that I used the alcohol inks in the center of. I've cut that down so that I can mat it on some purple cardstock. I've told several of you before that purple is not my favorite color, but I love this combination. Kind of the mauve with the purple and then the silver and then the blue. I adore this. So this was really fun and just such a cool look for a thank you card. For the rainbow thanks die cut, I did mat it on top of 2 other die cuts that were just white cardstock so that it would stand out and be dimensional, and then use some liquid adhesive to adhere it down to the embossed acrylic paint gel print, and then matted it on some blue cardstock that's Cobalt from the stamp market. For this one that has the blush background, I decided to turn it into a birthday card. Even though the text says thank you messages, it also just says nice things about the person that's receiving the card. So I stamped birthday on the bottom of the square, and then I put one of the other rainbow happy die cuts on top. And again, so much fun creating these cards. I really loved this. So I die cut the thanks out of the center of some cardstock and then matted my print on top of it. And I'm using some liquid adhesive to adhere the thanks. And then I did a sentiment strip that says "for all you do" in a light blue cardstock and adhered that down. And for this one, I stamped "for being a great friend" in Stamp Market Cobalt ink. It goes really, really well with that blue paint that I purchased, and layered a couple of the thanks die cuts in the sea glass from the Stamp Market. And now I'm going to adhere my print down to some Cobalt cardstock from the Stamp Market. Then I'm going to use some tape runner behind the sentiment strip and adhere that underneath the thanks. And the great thing about having those dots is it makes it kind of easy to line up the sentiment strip, and then the thanks can go just right on top of that. Again, super, super easy, but I had so much fun with it. I had 3 more backgrounds, wanted to get them done really quickly. So I definitely always recommend the Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips. Love these thank you ones that come in different colors. That was really, really great for me because I had kind of 3 different prints that I was working with. So I used one of the purple here that says "thank you friend," and then a little sub-sentiment that says "you're the best." So I am popping up the larger sentiment there, and just look at how cute that was. And it's super, super fast, no stamping. All you have to do is adhere them, cut them, and then adhere them down. I did want to mat this panel down, just have a little bit of color at the top and the bottom just to frame the print. And then I used the "thank you so much" and "your kind words warmed my heart" as the sub-sentiment. And this time I popped up the large one again and just used some tape runner on the bottom one. This time I am going off to the side of the circle with thanks, and then I really appreciate your kindness, and then matting this on an A2 piece of cardstock. So those three were done really, really quickly with some colorful cardstock and those Simon Says Stamp sentiment strips. I hope you can see how much fun I'm having trying out the gel press and different techniques using them. If you haven't seen my first gel press video yet, I'm going to link to that over here. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. In my first video, I used shapes. Let's remember shapes. Making some card backgrounds. Some.